Hi there, how's it going? We are continuing our Chrome extension development. So far we have created the first couple widgets, which are those things. So the first one is a time component, which displays the current time along with the date. And the second one is called a greeting component, which shows a simple greeting message based on the current time. So if it's morning, it's just going to say good morning, and it's just going to display your name or whatever you want here. So John, hit enter, and this is going to be saved here and in local storage as well, so it's not going to be lost. Now we're going to be tacking on the third app, which is the weather app, and all you need to do is to put a name of a city and hit enter, and it's just gonna return the current weather with this nice little icon and the name of your city along with the country. Right, so let's get into it. So the first thing I want to do is create a folder for this one. We're just going to call it weather, and I'm going to have JS file and another one for CSS. Okay, let's close that and focus on this one. So create a stateless functional component, and we'll name it weather. And then here we're going to have a simple div for this weather component, and let's just change the syntax to React so we get some cool JSX. Now in this div we're going to have a couple of parts. The first one is just going to be a search box for the city we want to look for, and the second one is going to be all of this thing. Okay, so let's go ahead and create a first div, which is going to be search box. Okay, and then here we're going to have a form, and it's going to have an input. Now this input is going to have a bunch of attributes. So it's going to have a class name called search bar and a placeholder. It's a search for a city. Okay, and that's it for the input. Then at the end, outside of this form, we're just going to have a button that's going to say search. And it's going to have a class name etn search. So I'll save that. No, I don't want to see these things. I'm just going to comment these out. And then here, I'm just going to say weather. That's auto imported. Okay, and that's it. So it's simple input and a button. Cool. Now at the bottom of this section, we're going to need to create the main part, which will hold the actual result, the data that will come from the API, all of this thing. Okay, so this is going to be called the weather widget, and for that I'm just going to use Emma to speed up a little bit the workflow. So we'll say weather widget, and it's going to have a weather box, which in turn is going to have a temperature div that's going to have a couple things as well. One for the Celsius, this is the actual temperature, and the second one is for some description, which I'm going to call the main. The second thing inside the weather box is going to be an icon, and lastly we're going to have the location, which is your city name along with the country. So let's take a look at that. So like I said, this is the temperature div, this is for the icon, and this is for the location. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to go right up here outside of this return statement, and I'm going to make a quick check for the API response. So I'm just going to test it. So the first thing we need to do is to bring in the API key. So all you need to do is to head on to Openweathermap website, create an account, and get your own key. You can check out the link in the description. The website is self-explanatory, So get your own key and come back here. Alright, so I'm gonna create a couple things related to the API. So the first thing, as I said, is the API key. I'm just gonna bring it from my notes here, paste it. And the second thing is the base URL, which I'm gonna call API URL. And this is gonna be copied as well from my notes. So these are the main couple things related to the API that we're going to need to use. By the way, an API key is something private, so we shouldn't expose that kind of credentials in real-world projects. In fact, we usually create a .env file where we can store these kind of secret or private keys. But for the sake of this tutorial, we're just gonna put it here because it doesn't matter. Okay. Now for testing purposes, I'm gonna use that button here. So I'm gonna trigger an event here, and when I click on it, I'm gonna run a function called search. Now let's just create it. I'll say const search is equal to, we're gonna fetch the data using the fetch API. If this is your first time using fetch, it is a built-in modern JavaScript method used in API calls and that kind of stuff. If you don't know fetch, you better learn JavaScript, at least modern JavaScript. I mean, if you don't want to struggle a lot when learning React or any other front-end framework. So using fetch is as simple as doing this. We'll just have to fetch, and we're gonna pass in the URL is gonna be this one. Now the first part of this URL is the API URL, okay? And then we're gonna have some query parameters like this one. This is London. This is the city that is going to be queried. And then I've got another thing, which is the units being set to metric. This is going to return the weather in Celsius. And the last thing is something to authenticate, which is the app ID, which has been set to the API key. Okay, now fetch is asynchronous, so it returns a promise which requires a .then method if you want to keep it clean. So I'll say .then, and we're just going to get this response. And the first thing I want to do is to parse it. This response needs to be parsed with JSON. Then I'm just going to log it here, right? Then if there is any error, it's gonna have to be catched. Okay, we'll say catch, and then I'm just gonna log it here. So let's just save that and see what happens here. Let's inspect. I'll click search. There we go. We get a response. Now, if I look at it, it doesn't actually seem to be the desired response, because as you can see, just get the URL back and the status, all kinds of stuff, but this is not the required one. Now the JSON method is also going to return another promise, so we're gonna need another .then block to handle that. So we're gonna say .then, and then we're just gonna get this result, and right here we're just gonna log it. We'll say result. Now hopefully this is the actual result that we're going to get. So I'll say search. There we go. Get a different object here, and it's got too many properties here. You can see the name is London, the country here, and then you can see the temperature is 22. So this is the one we're looking for. So now if I wanted to get, for example, let's say, if I wanted to get the name, for example, I just say result.name, and the temperature, I'm just going to say result.main.temp. Save, refresh, search, and there we have it. London, 22 degrees. Alright, our provider is ready. Now let's get into the real business. Now here in this input box, we want to search for different cities around the globe. So we will write the name of the city here, take that name, put it into a query variable, and finally this name will be added to the URL as the query value. It's going to be added right here. Okay, then fetch is going to do the rest. So since this is going to be variable, I mean the state is not going to be fixed. You could search for any city. I'm going to put that in a use state hook. So right here, let me just first move up these couple things, so I'm going to say const query. I'm going to set the query here. Okay, and I'm going to use state, and this is going to be empty by default. Now this query value will be triggered inside the input. Whenever this changes, we're going to need to set the query to the value inside this target. Now if I happen to try something, for example, let's say search, well, we get the same response. It's still London. So we're gonna need to make some changes here. So this URL is gonna be tweaked a little bit. Okay, now this part, you know that we're just gonna remove it, and here I'm gonna use template strings, and I'm gonna put the first thing is gonna be the API URL, and then I'm gonna pass in this query here, and the next thing is gonna be the query, and then we don't need that, but instead we're just gonna get this and this and put it here. This is gonna be equal to the API key. Okay, hopefully this makes sense. Now let's save and refresh. Says fax again, search. There we go, we get it. It's too hot. So we now have access to the weather widget. We can get the data out of it. So instead of manipulating this result object, we can add another hook that will be reserved for the weather this time, and then we can take that object so we can start playing around with it. So up here, I'm going to say const weather set weather. I'm going to say use state empty. So we're going to use this hook as the main resource to get the data from. And now here in the search function, we can take the result and swap it up with the weather. So I can do the following here, just going to say set weather to result. So instead of logging the result, we can assign its value to the weather hook. Then we can use it to extract the set of keys and their values out there. Now let's try to make some progress in the weather widget with all of the necessary data. So we'll bring in the temperature, the city, the weather description, etc. So right here in this one, I'm just going to say weather.main.temp, and this is going to return the temperature. Right, now if I save it, alright, we've got some errors here. Cannot read properties of undefined, reading temp. So the object which contains the temp property is undefined. Well, that's completely okay, because React has tried to render that temp value, but it didn't find it. It doesn't exist. Not even empty or null. It is undefined. So right here in the Celsius div, I'm going to reset that to weather.name instead. I'll save. Okay, there's no problem here. Says fax. Now I can search and I can get it. It's alright. If I say, for example, time zone, save. There we go, we still get it. Now this seems to be confusing, right? Well, it turns out only top level properties can be accessed at the render time. Only this column. We can't go further. We can't just go like up to this one, or maybe that one here. We got an error when we wanted to access the temp property of the main object, which in turn doesn't exist yet. But we didn't get that error when we wanted to get the name or the time zone. So you could say one single nested property is allowed to be requested even when it doesn't exist. I mean, right here, we can say even like anything and refresh, and we don't get an error. But if we do anything else, we get it. You see? So one single nested property is allowed. So one way to fix that is by checking if the weather object has already been filled up. So we can read out the required properties. So here, instead of saying weather.main.temp, we're gonna need to check if the weather is already filled, so we can take a look at this one. If I save and refresh here, we don't get this error. So I'll say fax search. There we go. There is no error here. Now let's go ahead and do the rest of the things. So there's this thing main. Here, we're gonna say weather of 0, the first element of the weather object inside this main weather object. So I'm just gonna go and access this property here. So what I'm gonna say main. If I save it, I can see it. And then one last thing is gonna be the location. I'll say if weather is here, I'm gonna say weather.name. Also can do some concatenation here, and weather.sys.country. Okay, so we get them. Awesome. Now we can see most of the requested information. Now the current code quality doesn't look that great. I mean, we shouldn't do all of these checks because this is gonna take some time every time you want to bring in something. Regardless the redundancy of these instructions, we'll see how to improve that in a while. Now one thing I want to quickly change is the form submission. So instead of using this button here, or in addition to that, I'm just gonna say on submit, when I submit, I'm just gonna run this search function. So when I hit enter, it's gonna return the actual result. Okay, pages has reloaded because this is the default behavior of forms in HTML. So I'll say e.prevent this default behavior. Save it, and then there you go. Okay, the next thing is the icon. So inside this icon here, I'm going to create an image tag where I will put the image coming up from the API. But let me first show you the image. So I'll say and we're going to get the icon. Okay, it's right here in this object. You see the icon says 03D. Okay, good. Now if I save it, what's wrong with that? Yeah, whether it's 0, that's a small error here. 01D. This is how they named their icons. I mean, they probably have like 20 or more icons. They named them with numbers, and this letter might be day or night for short. Okay, I'm gonna use that thing, but let me show you how an icon URL is made. So I've got this Openweathermap/img/wp. Okay, this is the directory where their images are stored, and then we got this 01D. Okay, if you change that to, for example, 2, it's gonna give you another image. And then we've got this thing 2x. That means the size of the image. You say 4, for example, it's going to give you a bigger image. Okay, let's go ahead and just create this image tag and put it here. So here, what I'm going to say, I'm just going to get this, and here let's put that. But before we do that, I'm going to paste the base URL of the image, and then at the end I'm gonna say 2x.png. Alright, and then alt say weather icon. Let's save it. Now we get it. Great. So now you can notice that everything is depending on the weather object. So instead of checking the weather state for each property, we'll move it out and do one single check for the whole weather widget div. So using the ternary operator, we'll say if the weather is ready, then we're going to do that. We're going to put this, we're going to show that. Else, we're going to just show a simple weather widget. Again, it's just going to have an H3 that says search for a proper city name, and then let's just give it a class name. clean search. All right, let's refresh. You see, at first we get this thing. If we put something here, we'll say this is what we get. Now I'm going to add a loading indicator. So during the fetch phase, we need to display some animation right here, or a message telling the user we are loading the requested data. So right here, I'm just going to create another hook. Let's say const loading weather, and then set loading weather, and it's going to be equal to use state, and this is going to be set to false by default. It's going to be a Boolean value this time. Then going all the way down to the bottom inside this weather widget, if the weather result is still loading, say loading weather, then we're gonna return an h4 that says loading data. Okay, and this has the class name of clean search. Right, if it's loading, then we're going to show that, else show this. Okay, save it. So it's fax again, and we don't see that. And then again, we can't see that. Well, that doesn't show. I think there's a problem here in the code. So we set the default value of loading weather to false, but we didn't change it. There is no use of the set loading weather here. So we're gonna need to handle that within the search function. So here we're gonna set loading weather to true. And then when we finish setting the weather result here, we're gonna reset loading weather to false. So loading has finished, and that's it. So let's just say fax. There we go. You can see it. So what's next? Well, let's import the styles so we can play around with the widget background and some other cool stuff. So I'm just gonna copy them from my notes, paste it here, and we'll just talk a little bit about it. So what do we have here? You know that this is the weather widget. It has a display flags, got some margin, padding, round corners, fixed width and height, a linear gradient background, smooth transition. This is the class of the weather when it gets warm. And here's the search, and this is the search box. This is a couple of classes for the search bar. When it's not shown, it's gonna be translated to the top, and when it's shown, it's gonna sit right here. Okay, it's gonna sit here. Okay, then we got some styles for the input. What else? Got the button. This is the close button. It's gonna have an absolute position, transparent background. You know, just simple stuff. Okay, this is the background of the search box when it's on focus. You can see now it's on focus. This is how the background looks like. If it's not, it's just gonna be kind of grayed out. And this is the weather widget again. Some margin here. You know, just pretty simple CSS properties being set to simple elements. There's nothing fancy. It's all normal. So let's save this and just import it here. Weather.css. Save it. There we go. Thing here. Say it's fax. Okay, this is looking cool. It's all right. Well, I've got some problems with the elements, and so let me just look at this one. So I've got this search box. If I say, for example, here, let's say bar show. Nothing's changed. What do we do here? Now what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna get rid of this button. I'm just gonna edit it and make it a closing button here. And this is gonna be a function that will close the search box. Okay, let's just comment this out, click it. Nothing is gonna work here. All right. Okay, let's just change this to close. See it? There we go. Now it's getting better. Cool. So as I showed you at the beginning, the search box here is going to be toggling between a couple of states. whenever I click the search button, it's going to be shown, and whenever I click this close button, it's going to be hidden. Now we don't have this behavior yet here, so let's just go ahead and do it. Okay, the first thing I want to do is underneath this search box div is to add another button. So I'm just gonna copy that and bring it here, and this is gonna be search, and this is search again. Okay, and whenever I click on that, I'm just gonna open the search box. Okay, now let's create those couple functions. We'll start with this one, open search box. So right here, I'm gonna say const the search box. I'm gonna first need a new hook reserved for showing and hiding this search box. So we're gonna need to add a specific hook. When this hook is set to true, it's gonna open the search box, and when it's false, it's gonna close it. So let's go right up here and say const show bar, and set show bar state, and it should be false. So here I'm just gonna set show bar to true. Okay, now let's create the second function here. Just duplicate this. I'm just gonna put this here, and this is gonna be false. Okay, I think this is clear. There's nothing hard with that. So if show bar is true, the search bar within the search box is going to be shown. Otherwise, it's hidden. So in the div, in this div, we're going to make this different. This is going to be a sort of dynamic class name. So we'll say curly braces, and just delete that. And this is going to be the search box, the default class, and we're going to say if show bar is true, then set the show bar shown class. Else, I'm just going to set bar not show, and that'll do it. If I save it, refresh, you can see the search button here, and there you go. So this works, but we don't want to see this search button when we click it. I just want it to be hidden when I see this search box here. Okay, so what I'm gonna do inside this search button, we're gonna make a simple inline style. I'm gonna play around with the opacity. So the opacity is gonna be equal to whether 0 or 1. So if show bar is true, then we're gonna set the opacity to 0, else it should be 1. All right, let's just save that, refresh. So if I click it, it's hidden. If I click this one, it is getting back here. But you still, if you mouse over a specific area of this search box, you're still gonna see this pointer, and this is because we have used the opacity. If you use, for example, visibility, this is gonna fix the problem. I mean, I just wanted to use the opacity because it makes the transition a little bit better in terms of smooth transition. Okay, so let's see how it goes now. We'll say, for instance, Sfax. There you go. That looks good. If I say, for example, Stockholm, okay, it's called, and it. Let's say Sfax again. You know, it's warm. Now let's compare that with this one. So as you can see here, it's 27. Say, okay, 29 actually. And if I see Stockholm, now notice the background has this orange color. This is because it's warm. If I go to something like Stockholm, cold, it's gonna change to be bluish, right? So we're gonna need to handle that right now. So in the CSS file, I already have added a specific class for hot temperatures, and I already showed you that. Yeah, you see, weather warm. So we're gonna need to use this class and add it to the weather widget here. So it's going to decide whether it's gonna show the warm class or the cold class. So what I'm gonna do right here, this is gonna be different. So make some curly braces here, and the default class name is weather, and along with that I'm gonna say if weather is ready, then we're gonna see if the weather.main.temp is greater than 15, then we're gonna set the weather warm, else it's gonna be the other one, which is the default, right? Or we can just put null if you want, because I already have the default. No, I don't. There's nothing like that, so I'm just gonna delete that, and instead I'm just gonna put null. Okay, save that and see what happens this time. All right, so Sphex is hot now. If I refresh, say, okay, we're gonna need to handle this ref. Whenever I click the search button, it's gonna have to set the focus onto this input element. Okay, so it says Sphex. Okay, it's hot. If I say Stockholm, all right, get an error here. Oh man, we mistyped the the name of the city. And we're gonna have to handle that later. Stockholm. All right, that works fine this time. Let's just test this again. Let's say Sphex here. All right, if I say Hole. There we go. So remember that error. Let's say Stockholm this way. Get an error here. Cannot read properties of undefined. Now we're gonna need to take care of that. So you may need to add an error boundary or something to prevent that kind of disaster. But in our case, we're just gonna fix it with a simple quick check in the search function. So right here, after we get into this response block, I'm just gonna console.log response.status, so we can decide whether we should proceed to the next block or we need to escape. Right, now let's just look at that. Just refresh. I'll say anything here. Okay, I've got this error, and there we go. You can see it's 404, not found. So I'm running that. I'm gonna check if the response status is not equal to 200, is not successful. Then we're gonna log an error, and we're gonna do some other cool things. So I'll say if response.status is actually not equal to 200, then I'm gonna log it. I'm just gonna say here something went wrong, and we're gonna set the weather back to empty, and also we're gonna set loading weather to false. Now let's save this. Refresh. All right, we still get an error here, but we get this thing, something went wrong. So we just want to get this error message here, and we don't want to see this whole errors popping out there. Okay, so to prevent that, we'll just have to return false. And this is going to escape from this block. Okay, save and refresh. Enter. There we go. We get this get error, not found error, but we don't get the rest of the undefined things and that kind of stuff. Now what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna set the focus on this search bar when it gets shown. So we usually do that with use ref hook, but for the sake of this tutorial, we can do it quickly with a simple function. Only because we only have one single input in this specific app, right? So I'm gonna go right here, and I'm just gonna say set input ref focus, and this is gonna be equal to input. This is like the entered text, and then here we're gonna say if input is not null, and then if this is the case, we're just gonna say input.focus. We're gonna set the focus on that specific input. Then the next thing related to that, I'm just gonna get this. Sorry, there's an error here. This should be an error function. And then we're gonna take this function, and right here in the input, we're gonna say ref is equal to this one. All right, so the input we're looking for is that one. So right here, if I save, there's a search. auto set the focus on the input. So says facts. Cool. Now let's just round this number. Say, where is it? Say math dot round, and then just add Celsius. Save it. Cool. That looks better. Let's just remove this space. Now I'm gonna add something to the opening and closing functions. I just want to clear the input when I hit enter. So what I'm gonna say here, I'm just gonna say set query to empty. Just gonna put it here as well. Alright, let's save it. Fresh, let's say doesn't work. Let's see the input here. Placeholder, change ref. We should add the value here, and we're gonna pull the query. Right, let's save that. Refresh here. Say enter, and it still doesn't work. I don't know what's wrong with that. What if I click here? Yeah, now it gets cleared, and that's what I wanted. The problem is when I just hit enter, this whole search box needs to be hidden, and when it's hidden, it's gonna be cleared. This is the reason. Okay, so right now let's take care of that. So we just need to set the show bar to false somewhere in the app. So when we finish submitting, we just want to set show bar to false. So I'm just gonna put it at this place. I'll just say set show bar false. Save it. Refresh. There we go. Now it's gone. It's all working. And that's it. I hope everything was clear. Maybe you can take this further. You can add your own features, styles, animations. If you found any issue, drop it in a comment or check the source code on GitHub. So we finished building this weather app. Now I'll see you in the next one, which is the crypto app. This one.